So the theme I've chosen for the homilies in March is the notion of dreams and visions. So I want to do a third reading this morning with one of the first dreams recorded in the Bible. It's from the book of Genesis, chapter 28. And it's a dream that Abraham's grandson, who's called Jacob, has. He's been away from home for 20 years. He's on his way back, and this is a dream he has on his way home. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. And the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord. And he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head, and he set it up on a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. These are words inspired by God. So as I mentioned, the theme I've chosen for March, I want to look at the wisdom that's contained in dreams and in visions. So there are 5 Sundays in March. So today, March 2nd, I'm going to look at the dreams and visions in the world's great wisdom traditions. And then next Sunday, God willing, I want to look at the psycho-spirituality of dreams and visions. Then on March 16th, I'm going to do a recap of the first 2 homilies, followed by a Q&A. And then March 23rd is the community mass. And then March 30th, I want to share some of my own dreams and visions. I've been meditating for 61 years, and I've been recording my dreams since 1979. And so I'll talk about that in the March 30th. So today I want to focus on dreams and visions in the world's great wisdom traditions. And by way of introduction, I want to talk about, is there a difference between dreams and visions? So actually, in the original Hebrew, the word dream and the word vision are synonyms. So there's a great passage, in fact, in St. Peter's first homily after Pentecost, and he quotes the prophet Joel, and he says, in the days to come, this is God speaking, in the days to come, I will pour out my spirit on all humankind. Your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. Now, for years I thought that this was kind of discrimination, that the young guys have a vision for the future, and the old guys only have dreams of the past. But that's not true. Dreams and visions are absolute synonyms in Hebrew. So dreams are just visions that you have when you're asleep. And visions are dreams that you have when you're awake. So there are 2 kinds of altered states of consciousness. Now, dreams and visions then hold a deep significance across the various world religions and in great spiritual traditions. And while the interpretations and the teaching can vary from tradition to tradition, they all center around the idea of insight and guidance and healing and some kind of a connection to the divine or to the spiritual realm. So I'm going to walk myself through some of the great wisdom traditions of the planet and see what do these say about visions and dreams. Now I start with the oldest kind of known spirituality, or religious spirituality on the planet is shamanism. So in shamanism, dreams and visions are seen as gateways to other realms. And shamans will often enter altered states of consciousness, either through rituals they create, or through drumming, or through fasting, with the objective of receiving visions that offer guidance or insight for healing. And so dreams in the shamanic tradition are considered as a way to receive messages from the spirits or from the ancestors, or also from the natural world. So Gaia herself speaks to us in visions and in dreams. So indigenous traditions, for instance, believe that dreams and visions are deeply significant and they're deeply spiritual experiences. I remember reading a book years and years and years ago by a South African author called Lawrence van der Post. And he talks about a journey he took with a bushman of the Kalahari. And as they're walking in the desert, the bushman points down to his shadow on the ground. And he said, one day, this man up here, go down there. And that man down there, come up here. Because there is a dream dreaming us. So for the Bushmen of the Kalahari, we are a dream, that our shadow is having, that our spirit is having. And so the shadow we cast, in some sense, is a projection of our physicality, but our physicality is equally a projection of our soul. Now, in many Native American traditions and tribes, dreams are considered a hugely important source of wisdom. And so some tribes will practice what they call vision quests, where individuals will go out, isolate themselves for 7 or 8 days in nature, fasting, in order to receive visions that will guide their life's path or tell them what their role is within the tribe. And so the vision quest is a powerful way of literally making yourself available for a vision or for a dream. The Aborigines of Australia, they talk about the notion of dream time. In fact, dream time is the central aspect of Aboriginal spirituality. And they view dreams as a connection to the ancestral world and to the creation of the universe. So the dream world or the dream time puts them in contact with their own ancestors and to the very creation of the universe itself. And so dream time stories then are sacred for them because they relate to the origin of the landscape in which they find themselves, the origin of the animals they encounter, and the origin of the people with whom they interact. So the dream time is a kind of a much, much higher level of reality, which accounts for, the origin of everything you encounter. So dreaming then for the Aboriginals of Australia particularly is a kind of, it's an ongoing, timeless experience in which we connect to people and to ancestors and to the spiritual world. So in kind of modern language, I would call dream time as a kind of a portal. It's a space beyond time where ancestral knowledge is preserved. And so then dreams for the Aborigines are a source of direction and understanding for both personal and communal life. So that's what the shamanistic or Aboriginal cultures, which are about 40,000 years old. That's what they say about dreams and visions. Hinduism, which is probably the most ancient kind of mainstream religious system in the world. For Hindus, dreams are seen as a manifestation of the subconscious mind, what they call in Sanskrit chitta. So the dreams then are a manifestation of this deep subconscious mind, and they are linked to this cycle of life and death and rebirth, to samsara. So dreams then are hugely important in understanding the cycle of incarnation, death, the bardo state, and then rebirth afterwards. So in the Upanishads and in other great ancient texts, they discuss different states of consciousness, many, many different states of consciousness. And for them then in the Upanishads, dreams are like an intermediary step between waking and deep dreamless sleep. So it's a specific kind of consciousness. Some Hindu traditions then believe in prophetic dreams, where either divine beings or deities communicate with individuals either through visions or through dreams. And again, for Hinduism, there's no discrepancy. Dreams and visions are just two names basically for the same thing. They happen in different states of consciousness, but they're basically coming from the same source. Buddhism kind of can't make up its mind about dreams. You get two very, very different understandings of dreams in Buddhist literature. So in one place, dreams are seen as a kind of a reflection of the mind's defilements and desires and attachments. So in some senses, it's a negative. So Buddhism emphasizes the transient nature of all phenomena, and this includes dreams, that everything, is Maya in some sense. Now, on the other hand, there are some Buddhist texts that discuss lucid dreaming, the ability to know while you're dreaming that you are dreaming. and therefore to control the dream and be aware, use this as a kind of a mindfulness practice so that even when you're sleeping and dreaming, you can still be mindful. Now, on the other hand, there are some schools of Buddhism that believe that dreams can offer spiritual insight or can be used in meditation in order to reach higher states of awareness. So you get this discrepancy within Buddhism. So on one side, you have dreams highlight the impermanence of all things, and they can serve as a reminder to practice detachment and mindfulness. But in Tibetan Buddhism, you have a whole way of working with dreams. So dreams are viewed as means to transcend the ego and to attain spiritual awareness. So you got this kind of bifurcation in Buddhist teaching about dreams. Judaism has a lot to say about dreams, and when you go through the Hebrew scriptures particularly, there are some really powerful dreams and visions, and I'm going to just walk through a few of those for a few minutes. The reading I chose this morning was from Genesis chapter 28, and it's, as you remember, it was a dream in which Jacob sees a ladder connecting heaven and earth, and there are angels ascending and descending. And God is at the top of the ladder, and he speaks to Jacob, and he tells him that his descendants will inherit the land, and God will be with them. But there's an end to the story that I didn't include this morning. Jacob actually is wrestling with one of these angels of God. Throughout the entire night, they're wrestling, and at the end of the night, the angel catches him in some kind of a hold, and Jacob hurts his thigh and his hip bone. So he has sciatica for the rest of his life. Now, at the end of the night, the angel decides to change his name. His name used to be called Jacob, and now the angel calls him the name Israel. So Ish in Hebrew means man, and El means God, and Ra means to wrestle. So the new name he gave is Israel, the man who wrestled with God. And now obviously this is both a physiological wrestling match and also some kind of a mental or a spiritual activity. So it's a really interesting image. Chronologically, the next one I want to mention is Pharaoh having a dream. So we're talking now about, if you believe this is true, about 1500 years before Christ. And Pharaoh in Egypt has a series of dreams. And in one dream, he dreams of 7 very healthy cows. And then the 7 healthy cows are eaten by 7 very, very lean, scraggly cows. And then the next night he has a dream where there are 7 good ears of grain being swallowed up by 7 thin, scorched ears of grain. And he can't understand it. So they call in Joseph, the great interpreter of dreams. And Joseph tells him, that these dreams are meant to show that Egypt will experience 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. And the result is that Pharaoh appoints Joseph as his second in command in Egypt, and his task is to prepare for the coming famine, to start kind of making houses to hold the grain so that when the great years are finished, they have enough grain to sustain them for the next 7 years. If you believe in a character called Moses then will come about the year 1250 BCE. And Moses has an encounter in the burning bush. And he's wondering how this bush is on fire, but it doesn't seem to be kind of destroyed in any way. And so a voice comes out of it. So he's having a vision and a kind of an auditory and visual vision. And God says, I want you to go back into the land of Egypt and set my people free. And Moses says, which God are you talking about? Which God are you? I have no idea who you are. Who are you? And if I go back to Egypt, where Moses is actually wanted for murder, if I go back to Egypt and say, your God has told me, I'm going to set you free, and they say to you, what God are you talking about? What will I tell them? And God says to him in Hebrew, Ehiya Ashir Ehiya, which is always mistranslated as, I am who I am. There is no present tense of the verb to be in Hebrew. You cannot say I am in Hebrew. If you want to say, if I say, Ani Malech in Hebrew, me, king, there is no present tense of the verb to be. We have to get around it by what's called predication without a verb. And I met the same thing in some of the Kalenjin languages. So it's interesting that in Hebrew, there's a present tense of all the other verbs, but not the verb to be. And there's, a present tense of all the other verbs, but not the verb to be. So it's an extraordinary case. So you can't actually say, I am who I am, because you're creating a static situation. So what God actually said is, Ehiya Ashir Ehiya, I will be who I will be. In other words, whatever the occasion calls for, that's how I will show up. That's how I will manifest. So this was Moses' great vision at the burning bush. So fast forward another 300 years, around the time of Solomon. Solomon flourished about 950 BCE. And so there's a story in the first book of Kings in chapter 3 where God appears to Solomon in a dream. And God says to him, whatever you desire, I'll give you. What do you want? And Solomon thinks about it for a while and he says, I want the wisdom to be able to govern the people. And God is really happy that that's what he asked for. And so he says, okay, I'll give you wisdom. And as well as that, and you didn't ask for it, I'll give you wealth and I'll give you honor as well. So that was Solomon's dream. Fast forward another maybe 400 years, and you have the dreams of Daniel and the visions of Daniel. Now, Daniel lived at a time when the Babylonian Empire had invaded the land of Israel, and deported all of the people. So all of the people are living in Babylon. 722 BCE, the 10 northern tribes were taken into captivity by the Assyrians, and they were destroyed and never heard of again. There's only 2 tribes left in the south in Judea. And now in 597 BCE, King Nebuchadnezzar comes in and he conquers Jerusalem and deports the last 2 tribes. And then he comes back in 587 BC and he flattens the first temple, the one that Solomon had built. And also they're in exile in Babylon, and the king Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And it's a dream of a statue which is composed of different kinds of metals. And he can't make head nor tail of it. So he asked Daniel to interpret his dream for him. And Daniel interprets the dream. So in the dream, King Nebuchadnezzar had seen a statue in which the head was gold, and the chest and the arms were made out of silver, and the belly and the thighs were made of bronze, and the legs were made out of iron, and then the feet were made of a mixture of iron and clay. So he's asking Daniel, can you interpret that dream for me? And Daniel says, yes. He says, the head which is made of gold represents you, King Nebuchadnezzar, and the Babylonian kingdom. It's golden. The silver chest and arms represent the fact that this empire of Babylon will be overthrown by the Persian Empire. And so it'll be the end of the Babylonians. And so the Persian Empire is silver. It's a slightly lesser kingdom than Babylon. And then the belly and the thighs, which were made of bronze, this represents the Greek Empire, which would defeat the Persian Empire. And then the legs are made of iron, and this symbolizes the Roman Empire, which would conquer the Greek Empire. And then finally, the feet are made of a mixture of iron and clay. And this symbolizes a divided kingdom that would be partly strong and partly fragile. Often this is interpreted as the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of subsequent weaker empires or divided nations. So this is how Daniel interprets the dream for him. In other words, the dream is interpreted by the prophet Daniel as representing successive world empires, each more inferior than the one before it, but ending with a kingdom established by God, one that will endure forever. So there's some of the great Jewish dreams and visions. Finally, I want to end with some great Christian visions and dreams. So in Luke's Gospel in chapter 1, you have the angel Gabriel appearing in a vision to Mary, and telling her, blessed are you among women, and will you accept the invitation to be the mother of the Mashiach? And Mary says, I'm not even married, how can this happen? And the angel says to him, you will conceive the Holy Spirit and give birth to a child. So here's Mary's great vision, to accept to be the mother of God. Now Joseph, she's betrothed to Joseph, but they haven't come together. And Joseph appears 3 times in Matthew's Gospel. And always God is speaking to Joseph in dreams. The only time Joseph speaks is in a dream. And so the first time he's intending to kind of divorce Mary, to end the contract, because he didn't want to embarrass her publicly, but he was not going to marry her because he found out she's pregnant and the baby is not his. And he has a dream in which the angel says to him, do not be afraid to marry Mary. She has conceived what is in her by the Holy Spirit. So he goes ahead, marries her, and then the child is born, and then Herod is intent on killing the child. So in a dream, Joseph is told, take the child and his mother and fly into Egypt because Herod is trying to destroy the child. And then in Matthew's Gospel, you hear about this slaughter of the innocents, where Herod destroys all the boy children in the vicinity of 2 years and less. And then after a few years living in Egypt, Joseph has another dream, and he's told, you can now return to the land of Israel, but don't go to Judea, because Herod's son Archelaus is now ruling. Herod has died. Archelaus' son is now reigning. Instead, go to Galilee. And so Joseph takes the child and his mother and goes up to Nazareth in Galilee. So there's Joseph's 3 dreams. Then at the time of the birth of Jesus, you have the wise men, the magi, coming from the east, following a star. And they come and visit with the newborn Jesus. And on the way, they had visited with Herod and said, where is he who was to be born King of the Jews? We saw a star rising in the east, and we've come to worship him. And Herod is really upset about this. He wants to find out where this child is so he can kill him. So he says, you go and find the child, and then when you find him, let me know so that I can go and I can worship him as well. So, but when the wise men find the child Jesus, and they're aware of what Herod actually wants to do, they decide, they're told in a dream, go back home, but use a totally different route, and that's what they do. And then Herod has been waiting, and when he finds out that he's been tricked by the wise men, he then sets out to slaughter the innocents. And then you have the great dreams and visions of Jesus. So the first recorded one basically is at his baptism in the Jordan, where he's been baptized by John. And he has a vision of the Spirit descending upon him and a voice saying, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. So there's Jesus' dream vision at his baptism. And then immediately he goes off into the desert for 40 days. He's trying to figure out what is his mission. And he's tempted. Satan appears to him on 3 different occasions to tempt him. And then the next one is the week before he dies on the top of Mount Tabor. So he takes Peter and James and John to the top of this mountain, and he does a time travel. He has an encounter with Moses, who's been dead 1250 years, and with Elijah, who's been dead 850 years. And he has this encounter with them as he's kind of looking at the archives or the kind of the Akashic records of his own people before he dies in a week's time. And then the final vision or temptation, is in Gethsemane, the night before he dies, where Satan makes one last effort to tempt him away from his mission. You've got some beautiful stories of dreams in the Acts of the Apostles in chapter 2. I've mentioned this before, where Peter is giving his first homily after Pentecost. And he quotes the prophet Joel, and Joel had lived about 850 years before. And quoting Joel, he says, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. And as I said, this is not a kind of a discrimination against old men. Dreaming dreams and seeing visions are exactly the very same thing. And then you go skip forward to chapter 10 and 11 of the book of Acts. And there's 2 really, really beautiful, powerful dreams in those. So let me tell them for you rather briefly. There's a story of Peter who's having a siesta. And he goes up onto the roof of the house, it's a flat roof, and he's having a siesta. And during the siesta, he has a dream. And in the dream, there's this huge big sheet let down from heavens by the 4 corners. And inside the sheet are all kinds of animals walking around inside. And a voice says to him, Peter, take and eat. And Peter says, God forbid, this is not kosher food. This is treif. There's no way I'm going to eat that kind of stuff. And the sheet is taken up. And it's left down a second time. And a voice says to him again, Peter, take and eat. And it's the same animals. And Peter says, no, I only eat kosher food. And it's taken up a second time and left down a third time. And the final time, Peter says, no, I only eat kosher food. And the voice says to him, Peter, don't call anything that I've made unclean. And so Peter's wondering, what is this message about? Now, in a very, very different city, there is a Roman centurion called Cornelius, a very, very deeply spiritual man who had been really, really kind to the synagogues and had actually plowed money into the synagogues. And he has a vision, and in this vision, in his dream, he's told, send to Joppa and ask for a man called Peter and tell him to come to you and talk to you about the Christ. So he sends a messenger. He's given specific directions, a GPS, basically. And he sends a message, and they come into where Peter is. Peter's just visiting. He's not living there. He's visiting there. And they says, there's a certain centurion called Cornelius, and he wants you to come to his house. Peter says, I don't go into Gentile houses. I don't do that. And then he remembers his dream. Don't call anything that I've made unclean. So he sets out and he goes to the city, to Joppa. And he goes into the house of Cornelius, and he says to Cornelius, I'm breaking the law. As a Jew, I'm not supposed to enter a Gentile household. But I had this vision. And then Cornelius tells him about the vision that he had. So Peter begins preaching to them and talking to them about Jesus. And all of a sudden, there's a second Pentecost. And everybody in the house, most of whom are Gentiles, begin speaking in tongues, just like the apostle did in Acts chapter 2 at the first Pentecost. So at this stage now, Peter comes back to Jerusalem, and the Jerusalem church is really upset with him. Why did you go into a Gentile household? You know you're breaking the law. And Peter explains to him what happened in the dreams. And so they call the very first council of the church. You find it in Acts chapter 15, where they bring together the leaders of the church, including Paul, who had been preaching to the Gentile audiences. And they want to make out a rule, and they want to find out, is it necessary for Gentiles who convert to Christianity to first become Jews, and keep the 613 precepts of Torah? And they make the decision, no, we wouldn't be able to keep these laws ourselves, so why would we impose this on other people? So they decide you do not have to become Jewish in order to be a follower of Jesus. Further on, you got the story of Paul on the road to Damascus, where he's knocked off his horse, and a voice says to him, Paul, or he was called Saul at that stage because his name got changed, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And at this stage, Saul is blind, he can't see. And he says, who are you? Who's talking? And the voice says, I am Jesus, and you're persecuting me. And so he says, go to the house of Ananias, and I'll talk to you there. So meantime, Ananias, who is a Jewish Christian, has another vision in which he's been told, there's somebody coming to you, I want you to baptize him. And Ananias says, I heard about this guy. This guy has been killing Christians. And the voice says to him, do what you're told. And so Saul arrives at the house and is baptized by Ananias. So in brief then, the interpretation of dreams is considered a spiritual gift in many different Christian traditions. And dream interpretation has historically been a very important practice in Christian mysticism particularly. So in conclusion, I would say that in most traditions, dreams are viewed as a way for the divine or the spiritual realm to communicate with us as individuals. It's a long, long, long history of the importance of dreams. And these dreams and visions are often linked to personal growth and self-awareness and healing, both physically and spiritually. That you can use your own dream life and your own visions and altered states of consciousness for personal growth, for self-awareness, and for healing at every level of yourself. Now, all of these traditions emphasize the need for careful interpretations of dreams, seeing them, they're symbols that need to be understood in context. And so I keep differentiating between literal interpretation, symbolic interpretation, and mystical interpretation. So some traditions view dreams then as a path to a greater spiritual awakening and awareness, to be more connected to a deeper layer of reality. And so these teachings from all these different spiritual traditions, they offer a fascinating glimpse into how various cultures understand the mystery, the mysterious, and the transformative nature of our sleep experiences. Many, many years ago, and I'll talk about this maybe on the 30th of March, I had a dream in which I got the following, kind of insight. And what it said to me was, life is a dream that the ego is having. And the ego is a dream that the soul is having. And the soul is a dream that spirit is having. And spirit is a dream that source is having. Happy dreams, my brothers and sisters.